Today I will be refuting the speech made by June Park. June's claim stated, global warming is negatively affecting the world. Global warming is defined as an increase in the Earth's average atmospheric temperatures that cause corresponding changes in climate and may result in greenhouse effect, according to thesaurus.com. June made the following claims to support his main claim. Temperatures around the world have been changing. Extreme weather events around the world have been affected by global warming. And lastly, the ocean is a susceptible victim of global warming. I'm going to explain to you how technology is currently too new to gauge that the effects are negative. His first claim stated, temperatures around the world have been changing. I would like to start by challenging the evidence gathered for his argument. As June mentioned, Earth's 2016 surface temperature were the warmest since modern record keeping began in 1880. According to independent analysis by NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. This means that this is the hottest year on record. And on record, that means that's only been 137 years, because that's when the recording of Earth's temperatures began. Elizabeth Howell, a senior writer for Universe Today, is currently pursuing a PhD in aerospace sciences and states, while our ancestors have been around for about 6 million years, the modern form of humans only evolved about 200,000 years ago. These 137 years of recorded weather don't even cover 0.01% of the time Earth has actually been around. That means in 2016 may have been the hottest year in the last 137 years, but what about the 5,999,863 years before that? This is not a large enough sample size to get an accurate understanding of the climate changes and patterns. He also failed to explain the negative effects of this. The second claim I'd like to address is, extreme weather events around the world have been affected by global warming. To support this, he mentions the products of climate change result in heat waves, droughts, and floods, and tornadoes. These events have been occurring for very long times. It is believed that a journal entry made by Massachusetts Bay Colony Governor John Winthrop on July 5th, 1643, is the first recorded sighting of a tornado in what would become the United States. According to a research editor, Clark, a professor of history, University of Massachusetts Bay Colony, one of the original English settlements in present-day Massachusetts, settled in 1630 by a group of about 1,000. This means the first documented tornado occurred 13 years after the original colonization and only 1,000 people were in the state. Meaning, many more could have happened and it wasn't recorded or seen. According to Jesse Greenspan, a writer in history and the environmental, mentions that droughts are believed to be aged back to tropical Africa in the time between 133,000 BC to 88,000 BC. While these events are horrible and there is no link to global warming. The next supporting claim he states, recent hurricanes are not necessarily products of global warming. However, global warming has contributed in making them stronger. My response is, the technology hasn't been good enough until recently to truly gauge the hurricanes. Abigail Abrams, a journalist for Time magazine with a degree from Columbia University, explains hurricanes are measured on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, which runs from Category 1 up to Category 5. According to the Weather Channel, the scale was developed in 1970 by Miami engineer Herbert Saffir and Robert Simpson, a meteorologist who is director of National Hurricane Center. Although the scientists have gone back and done math on the hurricanes which occurred prior to the scale's existence, this must make us question the accuracy of the recorded data and the translation into the scale. This means every hurricane that occurred before this date was calculated and adjusted after 1970. The third claim he made was that the ocean is a susceptible victim of global warming. He supports this claim by stating, Arctic ice is rapidly melting away. This isn't the first time the Arctic ice has melted away. Catherine Zandinella, Office of Dean of Research at Princeton University, stated, glacier melting has occurred 5 times over the last 550,000 years. This shows that the ice has melted before the global warming scare. Again, he fails to prove the correlation of global warming and these events. So in conclusion, many of the global warming events can be deemed inaccurate based on the newness of science and technology that is used to track these weather events. There is not enough data that dates before the 1800s to get an accurate sample size and understanding of weather patterns and cycles on a larger scale.
What's global warming?
What is really going on? I don't know. Aliens are real. You can't be a vegan. You can't eat meat. Global warming's not real.
Refute that back easily.
It's not even real.
It was still really good.
When you start questioning everything in life.
I hate this class.
If I eat fast food, I'm not.
All right, well, you lay out the proposition, the secondary claims that you're going to be talking about. That's pretty clear. As you get to each point, you signpost it. That's exactly what you ought to be doing. Your criticism on the first point on temperatures begins with a pretty straightforward attack suggesting that we don't really have enough data on this. The NOAA, which is the source that the Advocate cites, talks about the hottest year in history, and you point out legitimately that we only have 137 years of historical data on this. Then you put it into context of the history of the world. I think that was pretty reasonable. It does seem to suggest that information that uses those kinds of statistics need to be taken with a grain of salt. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that there isn't any relationship that's going on there. If you had any additional data that talked about problems with the climate models or the ways in which the temperatures are measured, I think that would help a little bit. You don't have it's not a bad argument, it's a good argument. I know there are other things too that you could be saying there. Not that you necessarily had time. Sometimes you have to pick and choose. On the weather events and the impact that they could have, the record of tornadoes is interesting. I'm not exactly sure why we're talking about the first recorded tornado in America. I'm not sure that gets you very much. The better argument I think you have is that like the hurricanes, we haven't had ways to measure or record those things. The technology's not been available. We didn't have tools for doing this. So how do we know that any of these events are occurring, that they are stronger, that they are more powerful? I don't remember if the Advocate presented any data about the tornadoes and droughts that they were talking about. If they just had a generic statement about tornadoes and droughts and they get worse because of global warming, or if they had some data that went with it. If there's a lack of data, you should point out there's a lack of data. And second, you could say whatever data we have is, I think, problematic because it's not, we didn't have the technology for that. And then you could give your answer about the hurricanes. For instance, the hurricanes that everybody's talking about, we've only had this scale since 1970, and so that's a little bit problematic. And anytime you're doing an historical comparison, they're having to model this based on some of their best guess as to what the scale is. And, our level of confidence on that has to be a little bit iffy on those kinds of things. And I think there's plenty of criticism to go around on that. The last point about the oceans and the glacier mountain being 5 times deglaciarized, or I don't know exactly how you phrase that. That's an interesting point. Of course, that doesn't tell us whether or not in those previous 5 times we had any harmful effects. Maybe there were harmful effects that had happened the 5 times before. I don't know. So just like the Advocate doesn't have information that suggests those things, I think that's missing a little bit of something too. But you go after the underlying ideas and science, I think, a little bit, and that's probably the right strategy to do. Instead of trying to diminish the importance of these things, say, we're trying to make inferences here without sufficient data to do so. But I thought it was very clearly presented, and you did a good job citing your sources. Lots of good sources that you cited in the presentation also. All right, thank you.